Does it make you feel more personally invested in keeping up with the Laurel Dace and watching its fight for survival, knowing that it shares a name with you?
Well, of course, of course it does. It's really neat. Yeah, I never in my life ever imagined I would have anything named after me. You know, I was just lucky to get a career in fisheries. It's just, amazing.
Hey there, podcast aquanauts. It's your host, Casey here. In the scientific sphere, describing an animal is a complicated but critically important step in the process of formally adding it to the tree of life. The scientist undertaking this process has to provide a comprehensive overview of its natural history, from its outward appearance and behavior to its habitat and reproductive strategy. At the end of this complex undertaking, however, the describing scientist or team of scientists have the honor of giving this species its Latin, aka its scientific, name. This can be based on something that reflects how it looks or where it was found, or, in some cases, an honorific acknowledgement of a person. Many celebrities have had species named after them by scientists, from a wasp named for Jackie Chan, Acrotaphus Jackie Chani, and a spider named after Angelina Jolie, Aptostychus Angelina Jolie, to an ancient amphibian named in honor of, wait for it, Kermit the Frog, Kermitops gratis. In this episode, we'll meet Charlie Saylor, a now retired ichthyologist who was responsible 50 years ago for bringing the Laurel Dace to the attention of the scientific community. In recognition of this role and Saylor's long career in fish science, he was honored by the scientist who later described the Laurel Dace, Dr. Chris Skelton, by being this embattled minnow's scientific namesake, Chrosomus saylori. In today's discussion, we'll learn about how Saylor first discovered the Laurel Dace, the path to its formal recognition as a species, and his personal investment in watching the dramatic turns this rare minnow has taken over the last several decades. That's a lot of history to cover in an hour, though, so we should probably get started. On with the podcast. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Podcast Aquatic, the official podcast of the Tennessee Aquarium. Today, I am so excited because not only are we going to be talking about one of my favorite animals here at the aquarium, or one that's been central to a lot of our work here at the aquarium for the last many years, actually predating, I think, my arrival at the aquarium a decade ago. But we're going to be doing it with one of the scientists who played a pivotal role in our understanding of that species and introducing that species to the wider world. But before I get too far into it, let's introduce today's guest. Today, we've got Dr. Bernie Kahida, who is our aquatic conservation biologist and a frequent guest of this show. Bernie, thanks so much for joining us yet again.
No problem. I love me some Laurel Dace.
Oh, you spoiled it. All right. Well, yes, we're going to talk about the Laurel Dace. It wasn't going to be a secret for very long. And our special guest for today, although Bernie is special himself, our extra special guest is Charlie Saylor, who is a retired TVA ichthyologist. So, Charlie, thank you for joining us, and we'll get into why you're on this episode in just a second. But when did you retire from TVA, and what were your responsibilities while you were working with them?
I retired in 2014. I had various things I worked on toward the end. I started out just as a field hand, and then started doing the taxonomy of looking at fish samples and figuring out what we had. And then toward the end there, I hit a mid-level management position. Then I went back down. I thought I really didn't know exactly what I was, but I guess aquatic biologist. Now, I did reporting and project planning, and just interfaced with a bunch of different agencies, and led 2 or 3 projects.
And how long were you with TVA ultimately? How many years?
I started on a personal service contract in 1972, and so I was there quite a while.
42 years, if I'm doing my math right?
Yeah, about right, yeah.
Wow. So what was it that made you want to enter the field? How did you find your way into studying fish?
Oh, well, ever since I was a little kid, I've loved fish. I can remember, I think the first fish I ever saw was a brook trout my dad had caught. And I remember him bringing that home, and I'm thinking, that's the prettiest thing I've ever seen. And then he would take us fishing at least once a week. My brother and I he'd take us both fishing. And so we fished a lot, waded a lot of the rivers and streams. And then, so I just had a passion for water and for fish and, pretty much everything in the water, it turns out.
Okay, so you are based in Knoxville now. Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, I was raised, Knoxville's my hometown, but I live in Clinton now.
Oh, okay. So before we get too deep into today's focus on the Laurel Dace and your association with the Laurel Dace, I would like to know, do you two know each other? You, Bernie, and Charlie? Bernie, had you met Charlie before today?
Yeah, we've ran into each other over the years several times. Most recently was at the first Laurel Dace Day last May.
Yeah. We both would go to some of the professional meetings, the same professional meetings, the Southeastern Fisheries Council, and probably American Fishery Society meetings. And then he's been out sampling lake sturgeon. I've seen him there, and some of the lake sturgeon stuff. We talk and stuff.
Good. So this is not a first time for either one of you. And but for some people, this might be the first time that they're hearing about the Laurel Dace. So who wants to tackle the introduction for this species with which the aquarium has done so much work, both researching and protecting, and as we'll discuss, outreach through events like Laurel Dace Day. Who wants to say what a Laurel Dace is?
Go for it, Charlie. You're the one that recognized it as something different.
Oh, actually, I was not the one that recognized it as something different, but it is about a 2.5 to 3 inch long minnow that lives in a restricted area on top of Walden's Ridge. I guess there were two or three streams up there that it's known from. Well, there were 6 populations total, but 2 or 3 major drainages. And it is one of the prettiest little minnows you will ever see, with gold and black and red. And, you couldn't come up with a better design if you'd hired somebody to do it. And the thing lives up on top of that ridge, on top of sandstone cap, essentially. And so there's not a lot of groundwater there. The water runs off pretty fast. Those streams typically up on the plateau will go dry if they're small watersheds. I think under 100 square miles, you could pretty much bet anything under 100 square miles will go down to isolated pools. So these streams are a lot smaller than that. But it's essentially a species that was living on the edge. So anyway, that's where we found it. I was working with some other biologists up there, TVA biologists, and we were doing some preliminary assessment. Do you want me to go into when we first captured the thing? Or?
Yeah. Your history with it is sort of the history of the species as far as the wider world is concerned. So go ahead and walk us through it. How did you meet the Laurel Dace for the first time?
Well, we were doing samples on Laurel Creek and Horn Creek for TVA. They were, preliminary assessments, environmental assessments. And when I first saw those pop up in the sample, I was thinking they were southern red-bellied dace. There's, I guess there's three species of red-bellied dace that live in the Tennessee, and one of them's Tennessee dace, and these were clearly not Tennessee dace. They didn't have the lateral band wasn't broken. That would default right down to southern red-bellied dace. So that's what I thought they were. That's what I called them. They would have keyed out to southern red-bellied dace. That was in 1976. And then in 1990, Dr. Etnier was about to publish his book, Fishes of Tennessee. And he sent out species distribution maps to a lot of his students and biologists that work for the state to get people to go over those distribution maps to make sure he didn't miss anything. And I looked in there and I saw that he didn't have a southern red-bellied dace from the top of Walden's Ridge. I thought, I got one on him now. He's missed one. So I told him, I went over to the lab. I said, you better put a dot up there on top of Walden's Ridge because I've got him. He says, I don't think you do. You better bring that over here. So I went and dug this. We had some specimens preserved from 1976, and I took them over and showed it to him. He says, I don't think that's southern red-bellied dace. He says it looks quite a bit different. They were chunkier. Their body shape's different, a little heavier up front. So he said that's probably a new species. And so that's the first time I realized that we had something different. That's when he recognized it.
Now, I'm curious because both of you have probably had experiences like this in the past. As a biologist, when you have a situation like that happen where you encounter an animal that you can be almost certain, either in the moment or maybe after the fact, when other evidence presents itself, that you are looking at a different species, something that hasn't been seen before, what does that moment feel like?
Oh, well, yeah, it's pretty exciting. I'd say Bernie, you know.
Oh yeah, I was going through some Joe Tomilleri illustrations for the Fishes Alabama book, and I was just checking his illustrations for errors. Not that he makes many, and I looked at this band fin darter that's in the Tennessee River and Bear Creek up in northwestern Alabama, and I looked at it and it had a bright red spot in the front of its first fin on its back. And I'm like, well, I've collected that thing in Upper Bear Creek and it doesn't have a red dot. He must have screwed up. So I got him to send me his photos, and sure enough, it had a red dot. And I'm like, well, why doesn't the one way upstream have a red dot? And that's when I first figured out that there was a blue-faced darter, a new species in Upper Bear Creek, and jumping over the divide into the Black Warrior River drainage of the Mobile Basin. So that was very exciting.
And I mean, assuming you've done that before, I mean, how many times have you done that in your career that you've actually found what turned out to be a new species? And I guess this is to both of you.
Oh, well, I've done it a couple of other times. The Chucky Mad Tom. We were on Little Chucky Creek. I was working with the state. Rick Bivens and Carl Williams and a bunch of us were up there doing a sample on Chucky Creek. And we pulled the seine up, and here's two Mad Toms in the seine.
These are little catfish, right?
Little catfish. And I thought to myself, these don't look like anything I've ever seen. And in fact, I thought these look like something that's in Middle Tennessee. You know, there's an elegant Mad Tom. I thought these look like elegant Mad Toms, but they're not. And I knew they weren't. There's another species in the main Nolichucky that this is, you know, nearby. And I knew it wasn't those because they don't stay in little creeks. And I mean, immediately, I see the fish in the seine, and I didn't even pick them up. I knew. When I saw them in the seine, I thought, new species. And it had, in fact, one had been captured historically out of the little pigeon drainage, but it wasn't described. It was just put down as elegant Mad Tom. But I see these things, and I'm thinking, new species. We broke out cigars, and we went and we got a big bologna and egg and tomato sandwich and celebrated. So I mean, you know, when you find one and you know it immediately, and it's just joyful.
Bernie, anything to add to that?
I was with a graduate student at the time, Steve Lehman, when I was way back in the day at the University of Alabama, and we were collecting these speckled darters throughout their range. And we got up into the Caney Fork and collected what is now the blue mask darter. And we're like, whoa, this thing is totally different. And and then we just started comparing between a bunch of different drainages, and some had orange spots in their fins and some didn't, and some had scared expressions on their face, some had stern expressions. So we knew we had a whole bunch of different things going on there.
So in your situation, Charlie, back in the 90s, when you had that discussion that he thought you had an animal that was new to science, or that hadn't been described as a new species, what was the process like? How do you go about determining definitively that it is a new species? Is it just visuals? I mean, today I guess we would kind of look at genetics, but I mean, was that the thing that you did even back in the 90s, or what was the process like?
Yeah, back then there were genetics, but and Chris Skelton, who ended up describing Laurel Dace, he had invited me to co-author the description with him, and I took a I was working full time with wife and kids and traveling half the time, and it's you do measurements, you do measure fin lengths and ratios, body proportions, scales. You dissect the fish and look at the internal parts and everything. It's real intensive. You know the fish inside out, even what the teeth pattern are in its throat. You know, I mean, and gill record counts. I mean, it could, and then you got to compare it to its nearest relatives, and all this has to be put out in a publication and made available for other ichthyologists to look at, but before the thing is accepted as a new species. But now he did genetics too, but I think the genetics has progressed much more now, and Bernie's more up on the genetics than I'll ever be, I think.
Well, way back in the 1990s and 80s, it was allozyme electrophoresis, and you looked at how different proteins moved through a gel with an electrical current because different species would have their different DNA sequences, which we know today, but the proteins would fold different based on their DNA sequence, and they'd move through the gel at different rates. If one was folded and it was a little more, bulky, and another one was a little more streamlined, they'd move through at different rates. And then you'd stain for that specific protein in the gel, and you'd say, wow, this one's really different from this other one. And so that's how you did it way back in the day.
I mean, that almost sounds like you're like having to present your dissertation and then just be critiqued by your peers and in the community, the scientific community. That's got to be nerve-wracking.
Oh yeah, and Chris, he did quite a bit of collecting in 1994 for his PhD dissertation, but 1995 was most of the time he collected. And I've got a spreadsheet with all the collections for Laurel Dace ever. And he really found a lot of them. The sad thing is they were really common in a lot of places that today they're gone or barely hanging on.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I mean, I was hoping that you could provide us with an overview of the situation in which the Laurel Dace finds itself. We've talked about it quite a bit on this podcast. There have been numerous episodes that I'll link to in the show notes where we talk about the rescue that I'm sure will come up in your answer to this question from the drought. But why is it in a situation where we have to be so involved in protecting it and researching it and safeguarding it and talking about it to the public to make the public aware? What is its situation like right now?
Well, it is really down to a single stream, Bumby Creek. It's surrounded by forest, and so the watershed is relatively healthy. There have been a few clear cuts and poor road management of dirt roads that have caused some sedimentation, but overall, the population is really healthy. We rediscovered it in another creek, Upper Moccasin Creek, just last summer after we hadn't seen it for 13 years. But it was way, way up near the headwaters. And then the third creek that it may still be in is Young's Creek, but every single fish from Young's Creek we have here at the Conservation Institute of the Tennessee Aquarium. And those are the northern population, which is genetically distinct from the southern population. And that's where Charlie first collected it, in Laurel Branch and Horn Branch. And it was also in Cup Creek and Soddy Creek. And back in 1996, I stopped at Soddy Creek because we had heard there was a new undescribed dace there. And I collected 15 of them with relative ease in Soddy Creek. And when I started here at the aquarium back in 2013 and 14, we went and sampled Soddy Creek, and it is just trashed. And all of these creeks suffer from primarily the same thing. Instead of cutting down trees on Walden Ridge and replacing them with trees, they're being cut down and replaced with vegetable fields. And that is creating huge amounts of dirt from these fields ending up in these mountain streams.
Well, and for a longer discussion about why that's problematic, and also on a more hopeful note, the work that we're doing to reach out to the community and to interface with farmers and landowners who have property that abuts some of these streams to kind of help us and be partners with us in this conservation effort. There is a discussion from last November that I'll link to in the show notes. It's really heartwarming because it speaks to the Laurel Dace and what it's come to represent to a broader community than just the scientists who have been exposed to it in the last 50 years, starting with people like you, Charlie, and later, Bernie. Because that is the story of the Laurel Dace is one of a lot of challenges that it's had to overcome, a lot of threats that it's kind of facing, but also in my mind, what's interesting about it is that it is become a story of how humans can both wreck the habitat, but also be important in efforts to save species as well. And Charlie, I'm excited again to have you on this show because you have this perspective that so few people have, in that you have 50 years of experience with this species. So when you first saw it, you said you described it as beautiful when you first started talking about it. Did it strike you as pretty when you first saw it back in 1976, or what was your first impression of it, other than that this is a southern red-bellied dace?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. In general, the red-bellied dace are always real colorful and pretty. It was, immediately I was pleased to see it in the sample. The other dace are probably as pretty. The Tennessee dace, they get really showy during the spawn, and they all congregate in the bottom of one pool. I know on Tennessee dace, I was out trying to collect some of those out of Palmer Branch one time, and was just trying to find, where they were. And I look out in the middle of this pasture in the spring, and there's one little pool area, and that pool area is red because it had all of them were concentrated in this one pool area.
Wow.
They were in there spawning, and they pretty much, you could just see it from about 50 feet away. You could see this kind of red stuff in the pool area, and I thought, there they are. But yeah, they're a striking fish, and they can jump. Boy, it's amazing. Those guys can jump 2 or 3 feet. If you have them in a cooler and you open the lid, sometimes they all jump out.
Laurel dace can jump?
I imagine they can. I think they all can. Tennessee dace is the one that I experienced it with first. I don't know, have they jumped on you, Bernie, when you open a cooler up or something, just have them all come piling out?
Oh, they definitely jump. We have to put a net over the top of the bucket or a lid with a hole in it to put a bubbler in there, or else they will jump out of the bucket.
And it's not like 1 or 2 of them jump out. It's like they all jump at once.
The Tennessee Aquarium's podcast Aquatic is made possible by support from the Tennessee Conservationist, the official magazine of Tennessee State Parks. Each issue is filled with fascinating stories about Tennessee's native species, rich history, and unique culture. It's also your guide to exploring state parks and planning your next outdoor adventure. Subscribe today at tnconservationist.org. Bernie, I think we're leaving out a couple of the challenges that they face, because not only are they dealing with sediment, but you've mentioned that Young's Creek, there is a population there, but it's not doing well for a completely different reason. And then there's also, why don't you talk about that actually? Because I'm not the scientist here.
All right, so I collected Laurel Dace in Youngs Creek from like 2014 through 2019, and they always looked great. There were always hundreds of individuals in Youngs Creek, even though the habitat was full of silt and dirt. And then in 2020, we went and collected them, and all the adults were covered with these huge bumps, these cysts on their belly, on their head, on their back, on their sides. Some of them had 15, almost 20 of these bumps on them. And it turns out these bumps are a parasite called the yellow grub disease. And it is in a group of parasites called trematodes. And they have interesting life histories. Most of the adults live in birds, wading birds. And then when the wading bird takes a poopy in its pond or stream, there's eggs from that adult, and they turn into a phase called miracidium. They swim into a snail and infect a snail. They undergo a transformation to this stage called a cercaria. They swim out of the snail. They've got little eye spots and forked tails. They find a fish and they burrow into the side of a fish. The fish's immune system causes a cyst around them, but then they grow into a yellow grub in that cyst in the fish called a metacercaria. Then a wading bird eats the infected fish and they turn into adult parasites and the whole life cycle continues.
Oh my God. I don't think I've ever had you tell me this life cycle in such gruesome detail. That makes it sound even worse than I thought it was.
It is, and we've got pictures. We work with a parasitology lab down at Auburn University, and they took a bunch of snails back to their lab from a farm pond at the headwaters of Youngs Creek. And they have pictures of hundreds, if not thousands, of these cercaria swimming out of these snails. And then they took a close-up of one, and it kind of looks like an alien. It's pretty scary.
Wow. There are also, I think you found invasive like bluegill or sunfish, green sunfish, I think, in Bumby before, haven't you?
Yeah, so some of the streams up on the ridge naturally have other fishes, a lot of other different kinds of minnows, maybe darters, sunfish, basses. They all have black-nosed dace. They seem to be way up there, and most of them have white suckers. But like Soddy Creek, you can get black-side darters up there. You get green sunfish, bluegill, largemouth bass, and they're probably natively up there. But most of the streams that Laurel Dace are found in, they have waterfalls between the plateau, the ridge, and down in the valley. So sunfishes aren't naturally up there because they can't navigate those steep sections of creek and waterfalls. But people put them in their ponds. You get a heavy rain event. It tops the dam. The green sunfish, bluegill, and bass get out of the dams and into the creeks. And now you've got a predator that you have not evolved with for the last couple million years, and it eats you and it eats your young. And so they've got all these non-native sunfishes and basses, especially green sunfish, which have really big mouths for a sunfish or a brim. Same thing, different name. And yeah, they eat the heck out of the Laurel Dace. I had the fortune or misfortune to collect the last Laurel Dace ever out of Cup Creek, another creek in the southern population, in 2014. And it was a huge Laurel Dace. And the black-nosed dace, which are common everywhere, we only got 7 or 8, and they were all huge specimens, like 3.5, 4 inches long. And we've never seen a black-nosed dace or a Laurel Dace since. And that day we collected over 200 green sunfish.
Man, yeah. And green sunfish are super aggressive. They are, you can catch them on lures, and you throw them back. They just keep hitting. They don't stop.
Yeah, the green sunfish, they're the main problem up there. But you also do find some largemouth bass. And I don't think the bluegill, that's another kind of sunfish that has a pretty small mouth, and they probably compete by eating the same insects and other macroinvertebrates that the Laurel Dace eat, but they probably don't eat them directly. Maybe they're young, but certainly not the juveniles or adults. But and then the last issue has been the severe droughts that we've had over the last couple of years, especially in 2024.
That drought back in 2024 was the second time in my time at the aquarium that we had to go out and actually actively. I think the first time back in 2016, we were just checking on the Laurel Dace, but in 2024, we had to take steps beyond that and actually remove or rescue really hundreds of Laurel Dace from the wild, from those two remaining streams that we know that they're still in. That was such a harrowing moment.
And the amazing thing is, we took water quality at all those isolated pools, and the oxygen was zero in almost every pool. As Charlie mentioned, during their natural evolution over the last hundreds of thousands and millions of years, those streams have pooled up. So I think they've adapted to just breathing air right at that water air interface. And even though if you put a probe, a foot down in the creek and it says zero oxygen, there is oxygen, that extreme upper level of the water. And so I think they're kind of used to hanging out there and, just making the best of a bad situation till the rains come in November. But the problem about this extreme drought in 2024 is all the water disappeared from Young's Creek except one single pool. And there were only a handful of pools that retained water in Bumby Creek. It was a drought that just went on and on and on. And it started in June and lasted all the way to late November.
Charlie, I'm curious. In the 42 years that you were with TVA, I mean, we talked about 1976 being when you were kind of introduced to the Laurel Dace, and a little bit of that work in the 90s that led to it being described as a new species. I think in the beginning of the 2000s. How frequently did your path cross with the Laurel Dace? Were you involved in monitoring it for the entirety of your time with TVA, or did you step away from it and just kind of keep tabs from afar?
Yeah, it was more just keeping tabs on it from afar. I when I go to professional meetings, I run into Bernie, or I'd run into some of the state biologists that had been, or even run into Chris Skelton and ask him about it. And I kind of, it seemed like every time I talked to somebody, they'd say, "Well, it's not good." So I'm thinking, "Oh, this thing's getting in trouble." Every time you check to see if anybody's looked at it, they'd say, "Yeah, we're not finding them," or they're not as plentiful as they used to be. And so, yeah, I didn't go out and do much monitoring after, I guess, 93 or 94. I might have done some with Chris Skelton. I might have gone out with him and looked a little bit, but otherwise I didn't personally get involved in monitoring it.
So how does it feel, though, since when you were introduced to the species, decades ago, conditions I'm assuming must have been better. I mean, if they were more numerous and certainly more widespread. I mean, to watch it from afar, even as it kind of withered away, what was that experience like to kind of watch the downward trajectory that the species has been on? Because at this point, and Bernie, I that I love the superlative. And we often trot this one out, that we say that this is one of the 10 most imperiled fishes in North America. So that we're not just saying it's not just endangered, it's extremely endangered. It's not just mildly imperiled, it is extremely imperiled. So what has it been like to watch that trajectory from what was, I guess, at the time a healthier population to where it is today, where it really is kind of on the ropes?
Yeah, well, for me, it's depressing, but but you see it in other things too. Now, there are other species that are starting to lose ground. And there's some that may be extinct that we knew about, like the Chucky Mad Tom may be extinct. Slender chub may be extinct. Those are fish that we haven't seen in a long, long time. And there are others, you see the populations kind of dropping off. Some of the fish in the big rivers that people never really saw much anyway. they seem to be even rare. Like shoal chub is one that's a big river minnow that was difficult to collect, and I haven't seen one in a long time. Silver chub, which used to be really common in the main Tennessee, their numbers dropped down, but I hear they're starting to see a few now. Moon eye, which is a big shad-like fish that lived in most of in the Tennessee and most of its tributaries, they used to be common, and now they're pretty rare. So there's other fish that seem to be, having problems.
Well, Bernie and Charlie, both of you, when you work with species here in the Southeast, we have such a proliferation of species. Our biodiversity is unparalleled anywhere in the temperate world. So that gives us a lot more species just in general, but it also means that there's more opportunities for species to go away. So when you're working in conservation science, as both of you did, in your case, Charlie, and do Bernie, in your case, how do you keep your enthusiasm up for the job when you're working with some of these species that are on a downward trajectory, that are in decline? How do you keep yourself invested, or is that the motivation?
First of all, you certainly take the small wins. If you see an uptick in a species within a particular creek or spring or cave, if you work with other folks and take actions that change policy to improve the habitat, or you actually work with farmers like the Tennessee Aquarium is doing up there on Walden Ridge with these vegetable farmers to try to get them to voluntarily do best management practices to reduce the amount of sedimentation, dirt, and water running off of their fields with simple things like planting buffers around their crops. Between two hills in their tomato field, if they always have water rushing down and knocking down their tomato plants and they don't get any yields, well, just plant that in pollinator plants. And now you don't waste money planting tomatoes there, and dirt doesn't run down there. It's now covered in grass and other pollinator plants. And since honeybees are disappearing, we rely more on our native pollinators to pollinate some of those vegetable crops like squash and cucumbers and pumpkins. And most of our native species live in the ground. So by not plowing up that entire field every year, but leaving some patches of undisturbed ground, you're increasing the number of pollinators to increase your yields. You can also fence cattle out of streams so they're not creating trails that wash away and get dirt into the water, and they're not defecating and urinating in the creek itself, and you give them an alternative water supply. That gives you healthier cows because they're drinking clean water, and healthier streams. And this program we are involved with the Department of Agriculture can pay almost all, if not all, of the costs for these best management practices. So just being proactive in trying to improve the habitat, however we can, really is the thing that keeps you going for me. And then just getting out there and playing with the critters too. That has always been a blast. That's the reason I am an ichthyologist, is the field work.
You do get so excited when something interesting comes up in a seine hall in one of these little creeks.
It's the best.
Yeah, I think Bernie's right. I think, there's a lot of stuff going on. These cooperative efforts between nonprofits and government and then individuals is pretty encouraging. And like the Duck River now, there's been some protection. The governor is signing some protection for the mussel populations there. TVA has done some stuff with its releases that's helped some in the rivers. But what encourages me a lot are working with kids and the outreach and the environmental education for kids and high school kids and little kids, and instilling some kind of, it's easy, appreciation for nature. and for these little species. They get all excited about it, and they'll hold on to that when they grow up. They'll be conscious of it and hopefully make the right decisions. So that's encouraging. The kids are encouraging. And then there's always, and you may want to edit this out, a cold beer every now and then helps.
That's quite appropriate for a field biologist, Charlie.
Oh, okay. Leave it in there then.
Well, and you talked about kids getting excited about it, and in the case of the Laurel Dace, it wasn't just kids that have gotten excited about it that you could consider kind of a win for the species, but I mean an entire community did. It's so close to you mentioned the Laurel Dace Day earlier, so the first of those events, which is a festival kind of celebrating the fact that this incredibly rare fish is up on Walden Ridge near the community that is host to that event, which is Spring City, Tennessee. The entire community of Spring City has rallied behind the Laurel Dace in a way that is incredibly uplifting and inspiring. They have really just kind of glommed onto the fish and adopted it almost like not almost, literally like the town's symbol. It is like the symbol of Spring City now is the Laurel Dace, which is a really heartening story, I think. And Bernie, why do you think that is? Why did the story of the Laurel Dace and the challenges it's facing resonate so strongly with that community that's just down the ridge from it?
I think it was both practical and ideological reasons. There's this organization called Thrive in the Chattanooga area that encompasses 16 counties in Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. And they basically do planning for the next 50 years with everything you can think of, like growth and highways and industry and this and that. But they also have a section I think they call Natural Treasures or something like that. And Spring City sends people to these meetings. And someone was talking about in Spring City that they are getting more and more and larger floods in the Piney River that runs through the community. And then someone mentioned, well, there's a lot more vegetable farming up there, and half the field is covered in plastic because they put a row of plastic underneath every row of vegetables so you don't get the weeds growing up. And so you sort of have like urban stormwater runoff in a rural environment. And they're like, so you mean if we help the Tennessee Aquarium and the Department of Agriculture get best management practices for this little fish, it's going to lessen our flooding also? That is great. And so it was just sort of an epiphany, like I've been preaching and every aquatic biologist has forever, is it's all interconnected. We all live in a watershed, and everything that affects our waters at the bottom of that watershed affects everyone that lives from the top of the ridge to right next to the river. And so I think that's sort of where the ideological part of it is, that we are all connected. This is a unique fish. It's part of Spring City's natural heritage that if it becomes extinct, it can never be replaced. And so they've really grabbed on to this fish and made it one of their own citizens. It's really cool.
It is extremely cool. And it is, they adopted it not only as it's the town's official fish. And May 15th, they designated, which was the date of the inaugural Laurel Dace Day celebration last year. That is officially Laurel Dace Day in Spring City. This year's festival happens to take place the day after that on May 16th. So Saturday, May 16th is the second Laurel Dace Day.
Casey, let me interrupt you. It was May 17th last year, and that's the official Laurel Dace Day.
Oh, okay.
I know that because that's my wife's birthday.
May 17th, excuse me. But yes, so May 17th is officially Laurel Dace Day in Spring City, which again, that speaks to the level of, again, rallying behind this species that has happened in this community of about 2,000 people in Ray County, just north of Chattanooga.
I just think that it's kind of unique because the situation for the Laurel Dace is very easy to understand. A lot of species disappear very quietly, and no one even notices, you know. And there's always the question, well, is it really gone? You know, maybe we haven't looked hard enough. And that's what it was, slender chub. Is slender chub really gone? Well, we don't know. But Laurel Dace, you know, if you don't have water, you don't have fish. And it's absolutely and very clear that this thing is on the verge of extinction. People understand that. That's one thing. And that's the second thing is it's a very attractive fish, you know, and doesn't really cause any problems for anyone. So it's the kind of thing you can appreciate. But I think that's one reason why the things, and of course the Tennessee Aquarium, you know, saving it is a big deal. That's a big deal. And what they've done, you can't say enough about the Tennessee Aquarium and what they've done for the species.
It felt like something out of Hollywood. The day that we piled in and caravanned up the ridge to literally rescue them from just these isolated puddles, basically. It felt very significant in the moment, and then as it has turned out in the aftermath, the response from the public, I think, to the drama of that moment, like you said, Charlie, is something that really resonated with people. I think the underdog story of this fish kind of just barely hanging on despite getting knocked down over and over and over again by all of these different things, whether it was parasites or drought or bass or dirt. I mean, just the fact that it has held on as long as it has. I mean, people admire that fighting spirit, so to speak. And I think that's definitely something that people have, like, again, they just have bought into it and are now kind of invested in its survival. And everybody loves the story about an endangered species that eventually finds its way off the endangered species list. It feels like a real win. And I think saving it from extinction, from near certain extinction, is kind of one of those moments where you can really see the positive impact that people can have, because all too often we're talking about the negative impact that people can have. This was a moment where people really did ultimately save the day. I mean, they might have been responsible for it being in the situation it was in to begin with, but that was literally us riding to the Laurel Dace's rescue.
And I would be remiss not to mention that it's just not the Tennessee Aquarium. We are the main organization that is involved in the day-to-day operations, but we've got a whole suite of partners involved in assisting with this, from Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency to, of course, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Some of the national fish hatcheries have held Laurel Dace for us. So it really is a huge partnership trying to bring the species back from the brink of extinction. Absolutely a partnership. It's all collaborative, and I didn't mean to imply that it was just us, but yes, absolutely, we had partners on that day and in the weeks and months after that. So, Charlie, one thing I've kind of buried this far down into the podcast is that the Laurel Dace is actually named for you. So its scientific name is, and I'm going to probably mispronounce this, but Chrosomus saylori.
Oh, you got it. That's right.
Look at that. First try. Yeah. So how did that come about?
Well, it was a surprise to me. Chris Skelton told me, he says, I'm going to name this after you. I said, what? That I'd have the honor to have a fish named after me? It totally blows my mind, you know, but it's truly an honor. And I guess it's because, you know, I've been around so long dealing with fish. That's mostly what it was, that he honored me with it.
Does it make you feel more personally invested in keeping up with the Laurel Dace and watching its fight for survival, knowing that it shares a name with you?
Well, of course, of course it does. It's really neat. Yeah, I never in my life ever imagined I would have anything named after me. You know, I was just lucky to get a career in fisheries. It's just, you know, amazing.
Well, to start to wrap things up here, because we're approaching the time limit that I think I told both of you to expect. You, Charlie, have been retired now for more than a decade, and you've kept track of the story arc for the Laurel Dace. What are your hopes for it as you kind of consider the work that we're continuing to do at the Tennessee Aquarium and out there at the Tennessee Aquarium Conservation Institute with people like Bernie, as we're continuing to research it? We're keeping an arc population against to stave off the possibility of its extinction in the wild by keeping brood stock. And correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, Bernie, but those are there to ultimately, hopefully, eventually, possibly in the future, reintroduce into streams as we learn more about its natural history. So, as you consider the future, knowing that work is ongoing, Charlie, what are your hopes for the Laurel Dace looking down the road?
So I think that the best you could hope for is that you were able to recover the habitat in its in the known range. To where you can have multiple populations in the wild. That would be the best case scenario. I don't know if you can get there, but that would be that I think would be the goal, and have several stable populations like it was initially.
Well, I mean, what does that look like for you, Bernie? As you hear Charlie's aims, is that doable? I mean, do you remain hopeful that we can eventually recover the species? I mean, could this be a success story like the giant panda or the California condor someday?
I think so. The problem with these species that naturally have a very restricted range, we call them narrow endemic species. That's the fancy word, like the Alabama cavefish in a single cave, the pygmy sculpin in a single spring, the spring pygmy sunfish in a single creek, and the Laurel Dace. Historically, now that we've found it was in 9 streams, and now it's basically down to 1. It's never going to be safe forever because it just naturally has such a narrow range. But we can make it very secure in the majority of those 9 streams that it used to be found in. And I think that is doable in the next 15 or 20 years. I know that sounds like a long time, but you can really trash habitat for a species much quicker than you can restore it. And so it will take some time first of all, we have to stop the input of dirt into the streams. And then once that happens, we've got to clean the dirt out of the streams, whether that's burlap sacks and shovels going in there and digging it out, or allowing nature to flush out those sediments with winter flood events. But I really think I'm really encouraged by the progress we've made in the first 3 years of this program with the Department of Agriculture, getting best management practices put on property. And it just takes a long time to gain the trust of farmers up there on Walden Ridge. We have one advantage. We're not the government. We're the Tennessee Aquarium. And so we can start the conversation. And I think we're picking up steam as the years goes by. And I am very hopeful that we'll have this thing in 4 or 5 streams here in the next 15, 20 years.
If you want to know more about Laurel Dace Day, we do have details about that on the aquarium's website. So if you go to tnaq.org/events-programs/Laurel-Dace-Day, and I'll have the link down in the show notes as well if you just want to click on that. You can get details about the where and when and all of the activities that are associated with it. We've got a 5K race, a 10K race that's new this year. There's a half-mile fun run, a farmer's market, live music. People like Bernie and other people from the Tennessee Aquarium Conservation Institute will be on hand to talk and answer your questions about the Laurel Dace if you want to know more about the work that we're doing. All that information's up on the website, and you can register for the race if you want to take part in that, as well as just get some more information. But Bernie, Charlie, thank you both so much for taking the time to come on and talk about a period of the Laurel Dace's history that I honestly did not know as much as I've written about it and done stories about it. Those early days are something that's been kind of a blank spot in my awareness of the species. So I really welcome the opportunity to hear from somebody who was there from the very beginning.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie, for coming on and letting us know how it was way back in the day. That's even about 10 years before my time.
Yeah, there was some, back there in the Pleistocene, I guess. Yeah, but it's thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed talking about it.
If you have an idea for a future episode of the Podcast Aquatic, send that to me at podcast@tnaqua.org. While you're online, go ahead and leave us a rating, or if you have a little bit more time, write us a review. Both of those are free and easy ways to support the show and help us with the algorithms so that more people can hear us. And again, if you want details about Laurel Dace Day, go to our website, tnaqua.org/events-programs/Laurel-Dace-Day. And in the meantime, until next time, remember that every drop matters.